Hi, everyone. It's very nice to see you online here. I am Marie Keister, and I am with Forward 2030, the Clark County Community Transportation Vision. And I'm joined here today by Glenn Massey, who is with the he's transportation planner with the Clark County Regional Transportation Coordinating Committee. And then we also have Andrew Parker, who is the project manager with Trans Systems, who's joining Glenn in overseeing this project, and we're just really eager to share with you several updates.
On behalf of Clark County TCC, I just want to welcome you all here, and just want to recap the meetings that we had. Marie's going to go over some slides, but I just wanted to welcome you on behalf of TCC Director Louis Agresta, the Clark County Commission, Springfield City Commission, and our steering committee. And we hope you find us informative, and we want you to offer up your comments, and you'll see something going, a little ticker going across the bottom of the screen here in a bit that'll tell you exactly how to do that.
Well, thank you, Glenn. So, Glenn, I think you might be pulling up some slides here in a second.
Yes.
But what we'll be doing is we are going to be sharing with you today a recap of what Forward 2030 is all about. We're going to talk about the existing transit conditions in the Springfield and Clark County area, what they are. We're going to go through previous alternatives and talk about what we learned from that discussion and that technical analysis early on, and then now moving into proposed alternatives. And so you'll have opportunities online to provide input. So we hope you will share this recording with your friends and let us know your thoughts. And then finally, we'll wrap up with next steps and what you can expect as we move forward. Then, Glenn, if you want to go to the slide with the discussion guidelines, I'll just point out that as you are responding, and here you'll see that link, there are times along this presentation where I will be posing questions. So as you listen to this recording and you're thinking about what questions you might have, I will have some for you too. And of course, as you respond online or share your thoughts, we always ask you to be respectful and polite. So actually, Glenn, I'm going to turn it over to you to share these next few slides.
Okay. So we started this, the discussion about this study actually began a few years ago. And we sat down with some commissioners and some employment centers, and we talked about the current state of public transportation options in Clark County. We identified that a lot of people were having difficulty getting to not just work, but school and anything after hours. So we really went into this with a desire to improve on the transit system while staying within the constraints of the current budget. So we partnered up with Trans Systems, and Andrew's been a big help with us. And Andrew brought on board Murphy Epson to do our PR, and the project actually started back in November. We expect to wrap the project up at the end of this month or into June. Following that, we'll do a presentation to the City Commission and also the County Commission. What we hope to get from this is we want to develop a plan over the next 10 to 15 years to offer and expand an improvement of the community transportation, not just in the city of Springfield, but throughout Clark County, to offer options to everybody in the county. Our goals, I mentioned that we had an idea of work access, but we want to provide service to everybody in the county while still being mindful of seniors, individuals with disabilities, lower income populations, and then of course employment populations. We had a steering committee meeting just over a week ago, and we had a good sampling of community leaders from the city and from the county, also members of our Human Services Transportation Council, Springfield City Area Transit, and we had a community member involved too. So we just want to ask you again, if you will provide, I'll put the ticker on the screen here in just a minute. We just want to ask you to provide any comments that you might have regarding this.
So Andrew, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Marie and Glenn. So the mobility options in the county, as you can see on the screen here, in case you're not aware, public transit is currently available in Springfield through the Springfield City Area Transit, and that's fixed route and demand response service. In the rural areas and somewhat in the city, there's program-based transit service, which is offered to qualified groups through separate providers. There's also some private mobility services available, but those are limited. There are some Uber and Lyft options. You've seen the Bird e-scooters around town, and there's quite a bit of private and community carpooling occurring in Springfield. Here's a map you can see of the existing fixed route system in the city. The lines are all color coded. They go pretty much throughout the area, the city limits. So the process we went through to develop the preferred alternative, which you'll see at the end of here, we had some draft city alternatives that we can see on the next screen that we present to the public, and then we refine those to come up with our preferred alternatives. So we presented 3 citywide alternatives: crosstown route linkages, the trunk and branch system, and community-wide dial ride, and 3 rural alternatives as well. One of those would be no change. The other was the dial ride zone service, and the final one would be the flex route bus system. So we gave the public opportunities to view these alternatives and provide feedback online and in an in-person public meeting. So I'm going to go over these quickly. The first draft alternative was crosstown linkages, which would allow everyone to transfer from all routes downtown at the same time. This combines some of the routes that currently exist, like the pink and red on the east side of the city and the yellow and green on the west side of the city. This alternative would have more frequent service closer to downtown. You might be able to see there's kind of a hollow line there. That would be 30-minute frequencies, and on the branches it would be every hour. Once again, at least in the near to downtown, everyone could transfer to every route, but if you're on a branch, that might not be the case. And finally, a dial ride system throughout the city, split up into 4 zones. I'll go into this more detail later. But the fixed route system would be eliminated, and there'd be a dial ride system instead with advanced reservations needed. So now we get to the preferred city alternatives, which you'll recognize from some of the draft alternatives that we showed you previously. So we scored each of these alternatives using the following criteria: equity and job access, which we actually weighted higher than the other ones that you'll see below; public access, the ease of use, the ability to implement this service quickly; public and stakeholder support; and the funding availability. That's for the rural alternatives, since that's a new system. So one thing we thought we'd like to transition this to the dial ride system for the city was the preferred alternative, but we thought a transition was needed to get to that system because it's such a big change. So we adapted the, I guess that would be the alternative 1, which would be the combined routing in the city. So you can see that the pink and line would be revised to incorporate some of the red line, and then the green line was revised to incorporate some of the yellow line, and that would be 60-minute frequencies on those. So we did decide to go with a demand response system in the city, but there's 4 options for those. Sorry. All of these options would have a flat fare for riding the service. All the options would also have an ADA component to them, where there would be no zoned service. So if you were ADA qualified, you could ride all over the city. But for the general public, this is what we came up with. The city would be, this is one of the options, sub options, I guess, for this. This option, the city would be split into 4 demand response zones with a transfer needed between the zones downtown. The advantage of this one compared to the other options that you'll see is that the smaller zones would make it easier to balance demand, and there'd be less advanced reservation time needed, probably just an hour. Disadvantage of this would be it's a kind of a complex system, which could make it hard to start because there'd be lots of rider and operator outreach needed, and transfers would still be needed for most trips. So option 2 is very similar to that, except there'd only be 2 zones. The zones would stay consistent throughout the day. More locations would be reachable without a transfer. Those are the advantages of that. Disadvantages would be there'd be a longer advanced reservation time and more trip refusals because the zones are bigger, and the service would be less tailored to demand. Some other details of this, and this also applies to the previous option. No reservation would be needed to ride from the downtown downtown zone or at the downtown transfer center. All vehicles would serve the downtown zone that you see shaded in there. Travel within a zone would not require a transfer. And there might be more than an hour advance notice needed for this, but likely same day reservations would be available. The hours of service would be weekdays, except for holidays, 6 to 11 o'clock at night. And finally, option 3 would just be 1 demand response zone. There would be no, with some vehicles assigned to high demand locations at certain times, which you see with the circles on this map. Advantages of this: no transfer would be needed within the city or to Navistar. Flex routes, flex trips that you see at those circles would be instituted to organize demand better to key destinations and employers. The disadvantages compared to the other options are same day reservations would not be available. You'd have to reserve a ride 24 hours in advance. And grant money set aside for a new downtown transfer center, which is in the planning process, may be in jeopardy since no transfers would be needed in the city any longer. Some other details: regularly scheduled trips to certain destinations, although a prior reservation would still be needed. These routes could vary by each day. Local employers could subsidize the service to match shift times. Special high school trips would match the bell times, and limited same-day reservations may be available, but unlikely. Once again, the hours of service, weekdays 6 to 11 o'clock at night. So I'd like to show you a typical trip comparison from the demand response system to the fixed route system. So right now, rider 1, who's going from Rones Manor, which you can see on the map over here, wants to go to the Bechtel Avenue Walmart. So right now, it would take 46 minutes to get there and 74 minutes back due to needing a transfer. For the demand response system, we estimate about 40 minutes there and 40 minutes back. The transfer would still be needed, but the transfer would not take as long. And rider 2 is going from Clark State College to Ohio Prime. The current system would be 40 minutes there and 50 minutes back. From the red and the blue lines, the transfer would be needed for that. But with any of these demand response systems, it'd only be 25 minutes there and 25 minutes back because no transfer would be needed. They're all in the same zone. Lost it. Yes, the rural alternatives will go to next. Thank you. So the first alternative was no change to the current service. Only seniors and social service clients can use the service as they can now. The next was a 2-zone system where you would have to transfer between zones except for where you see those T's and some of those shaded areas. And a flex route system, which would organize trips with 1 round trip a day going into and out of city of Springfield and to Ohio Prime. So the preferred rural alternative, with some modifications, was the Rural Demand Response System. This response system would operate throughout all the rural parts of the county. Everyone would be eligible to ride. One or more vehicles would operate on each side of Clark County, with cross-county trips generally needing to transfer in downtown Springfield. Certain high-demand locations would be served by all vehicles, and those are as follows: Tremont City, South Charleston, downtown Springfield, the Navistar plant, Ohio Prime, and Clark State Junior College. Transfer would also be possible to nearby rural and urban transit systems in Tremont City, Huber Heights, South Charleston, and Fairborn, which you did not see on this map. Days and hours of service would be 6 to 6.
So before we talk about next steps, just as you're listening at home, if you would think about these questions and let us know your thoughts, and you see the ticker at the bottom of the slide telling you where to send those comments. As you heard, there was a recommended alternative for the city of Springfield that would go to demand response or dial-a-ride zones. So we want to know what you think about that proposed preferred alternative. Within that alternative, there were 3 options, and we would like to hear your feedback on which option might be most convenient for you. Then on the rural demand response, or dial-a-ride service, we would like to know your thoughts on that recommendation, and also interested in all those cases where you travel today and what kind of improvements you're looking to receive out of this proposal. After we give you a couple of weeks to respond and provide input online, then we will, we will post this meeting summary just as soon as we can. The recording, you're reviewing it right now, so you know it's posted. Those will stay up so that we can receive your comment through about mid-June. We will review and digest that public and steering committee input. As Andrew and Glenn mentioned earlier, we have a steering committee that's just been a great partner in providing us information. And then the team will make some final refinements and present the final alternatives to the Springfield City Commission in June. So if you're interested in that, I believe that's a public meeting, and that'll be a great alternative to hear what is being recommended. So with that, I will close, and I'm going to turn it to Glenn for some parting thoughts, but I wanted to thank you for your time for listening today. Glenn.
Thanks, Marie. So we will be meeting with Springfield City Commission at 6:30 p.m. during a work session on June 21st. And then we will meet with the County Commission the very next morning at 8:30 a.m. At Springfield Government Center, 3130 East Main Street. So there will be opportunities. These are public meetings. That's an opportunity for you to come down and share with the commissioners your thoughts on things. But we hope that you'll reach out to us in advance of that so we can factor in your thoughts and your transit desires as we share information with them. Again, I want to thank Andrew Parker with Trans Systems for all of his hard work on this, Marie Keister for all the work they've done, and especially, you don't see her on screen, Liz Webb with Murphy Epson has done a wonderful job with our PR. And I want to thank the Springfield City Commission, the Clark County Commission, the city staff, and especially I want to thank our steering committee and those of the general public that have participated thus far.
Well, thank you, Glenn. And I think with that, we will adjourn.